Hi everyone, welcome back to Cello Tips. Today we're going to talk about playing the solo works of Johann Sebastian Bach. I thought it was important to speak about playing these pieces in particular because I feel that they are completely different than anything else in the cello repertoire, and thus they require a completely different approach. Now, I think most cellists, when they're learning the repertoire, learning the big concerti, the sonatas, and so forth, they try to develop a personal style of playing, a unique personality that they sort of apply to all of the music that they play. And while that may have its benefits, I often notice a problem when they take that style and then they put it on top of the Bach cello suites. And I think that's because this music is so pure by itself. And as I said earlier, it requires a completely different approach. We're going to go through a few of the things that I think that consists of and what makes that approach different. Now, the first thing to consider is that this music is for cello alone. So nobody else is playing alongside you. There's no orchestra, no piano, nobody else. It's just you. Silence and then you. And that being said, this idea of projection and of trying to play with a big sound is kind of pointless because your sound is not being compared to anybody else in that moment. You don't have to project over anybody because nobody else is playing. It's just you. So, in my opinion, I would suggest getting rid of this idea that so many of us cellists have in the back of our mind that we always have to play with a big, rich sound because otherwise we won't be heard. Now, once you do that, it's going to open up a completely new world of possibility for how you produce sound on the cello. And I think this is a very important step in order to finding the most pure sound and to exploring different things that might be suitable to this music. So that's the first thing. Just consider that you can push the limits of how softly you can play, and you never have to worry about projection. Yeah. A big part of the reason for that is because the nature of the cello, when you want to get a big sound and you're really trying to push for a big projecting sound, it comes with a bit of edginess. Comes with a bit of strain in the sonority we are making. And that can be fine when you're playing Dvorak or Shostakovich. And when you're in that giant hall and you got a huge orchestra behind you, sometimes that edginess is even necessary. But not only is there no need for that in the cello suites, but it takes away from that purity of the music that we are seeking. So the next thing I'd like to speak about is emotion in your music. And this is a very complex thing because music is emotions. It's about expressing feelings, ideas, colors, concepts, however you want to think about it. And I think there's a modern trend in music making that sort of, the more emotion, the better. And fundamentally, I don't think that's a problem. We want our music to be full of feeling. But when we are so obsessed in seeking to just max out emotion all the time, things get kind of messy and convoluted, and you lose the purity of the music. And oftentimes, I would argue, you lose the message, the profound message and the profound meaning of that music. And I think where cellists, musicians often get led astray here is that they think, I have to put my stamp on these cello suites. I have to make it my own. And so I'm going to do something that is quite different, a little bit outside the box maybe. And I'm going to approach the music with this feeling or concept I have in my head, and I'm going to put that on top of the music. And I would argue that in doing this, for music that is so great already, you're sort of squashing what it already is. This music is, let's be honest, it's by the greatest composer that ever lived. And it's arguably the greatest music that exists for the cello. So it really is like a sacred text. And I think we have to have a certain respect for that, certain reverence for that. And if you approach it with that kind of respect, and then you say, this text that is here, these notes that are here, that is what is great. And I'm going to give the best I have to that text and to those notes and let the emotion come through it. I think you're going to end up with a much more genuine and pure result. So I would strongly urge you to try allowing the emotion to come from inside the music rather than putting it on top. Now, I will close with two sort of specific technical ideas that you might like to try. The first one is the tuning of the cello. So, as you likely know, it's become quite standard for Baroque players to tune the cello or whatever instrument they're playing to A equals 415 hertz. And the fact is that in the Baroque time, tuning amongst instruments around Europe was not regulated in the same way that it is today, which is logical considering it was much more difficult for people to be in touch with one another. And so across the continent of Europe, the organs were tuned to all sorts of different hertz numbers. Many of them were around 415. Some of them were around 440, what most of us play today. Some of them were even higher than that. So it's not that I think we should play Baroque music at 415 because that's historically accurate, but perhaps you could consider having the leeway to choose what tuning you want to put your cello at when you play this music. And I find that if you tune lower, that it opens up resonance in the instrument. And that's simply because you're taking tension off of it. If the strings are tuned lower, they're looser, they're not pressing down on the bridge and pressing down on the cello and squashing the cello as much as if they're tuned higher. So I play the Bach suites at 415. And the other piece of technical advice I would suggest to you is to try holding the bow a little bit higher up the stick, maybe 1 or 2 inches than what you would normally do with your other repertoire. And the reason for doing this is that you can find a much lighter approach to sound and to your bow strokes. And all of this, the tuning, the holding the bow, and what I was talking about earlier with volume and projection, is basically that we are looking for a sound that is as pure and as inobtrusive as possible. To try and take away that edginess so that we are left with the pure resonance of the music in the notes. And that in itself is a place that I would argue the vast majority of cellists don't get to, So if you use that as a fundamental goal to get to that place where your sound is always pure with an open resonance, that your notes are always in tune, your chords are always in tune, your rhythm is good, these fundamental basic concepts, if we start from a place that masters those fundamentals, then I think you're going to find that the music really doesn't need much more than that. And in fact, if you're trying to do more than that, likely you're taking away from what the music has to offer. But the main problem that most cellists, most artists run into is that they are trying to add things onto it before those fundamentals have even been mastered. So I think everybody would agree that mastering the fundamentals is a good place to start. But especially in this music, I find it something that's often looked over. So those are a few thoughts for the day. I'm sure I could make a couple other videos on this subject as well. We'll see as time goes along. But I hope that's helpful for now. Please let me know if you have requests for future videos, future cello tips subjects. I'll always try my best to accommodate any of those questions you all might have. So I will see you next time.